As Jared is waking, she is on his mind, as though he wakes beside her. But now the sun is coming up without her for the fourth time since he saw her on the beach. He knew she would not come, but there had been a thin hope. Asking her was a thoughtless impulse, a ridiculous one. He rolls his eyes over the ceiling, turns his head slightly toward the peeling walls. The room looks uglier and more dilapidated since he saw her last. He cannot imagine her here. How has he lived here for so long? He does not look at the cheap clock on the bedside table. He knows what time it is. His perception of time has developed over the years, since the accident when he was a child, an instinct of when to get up or get out. "Fuck this," he says, and rolls over on his stomach, lazily as though rolling over in sunlit warm sand. "I quit." The night before, just as he was falling asleep, a wild impulse exploded behind his eyeballs. Quit. Talk her into leaving with him. Start over. He gets up. He showers, dresses, and opens the top drawer of the small dresser. He has not seen his gym bag for 2 years. He unrolls the lime green duffel bag, white swoosh logo on one side, and shakes his head. How many games of racquetball, golf, saunas, talking business with Grant, up at 4:30, after 5 or 6 hours of sleep, so he could get to the offices before 6. Grant already there. He was always there, and no matter how hard he worked, busted his ass, Leonard was always effortlessly 2 steps ahead. After only 2 weeks working alongside the golden boy, Jared realized Leonard was something else, something as fast and omnipresent as light, bendable, nonconformist, something so changeable he becomes whatever he needs to be in any instance, shining without judgment on both good and bad. Leonard has both chaos and numbers in his eyes. Jared is long past hating Leonard, but he is envious still because of that which he thinks he cannot have. Leonard does not take. It is not possessive. He simply illuminates and thereby understands. Jared is envious of the fact that Leonard would still, after all Jared has done wrong, shine on him as warmly as he does everyone and everything else. He laughs. How conspicuous am I going to look carrying this thing out of here, he asks himself, looking at the bag. In the midst of all this brown and gray, the duffel has lain in this drawer for 2 years, unzipped. Inside, nothing but what had been a brand new lip wax in a sealed black and white plastic tube. A stick of deodorant rolled down below the oval of its black plastic rim is found in the inner side pocket, the cracked cap fallen off. He remembers that last day at the offices, throwing the gym bag at the wall after Jody came in and told him what was coming down. Gym shorts, t-shirts, and socks flew out of the unzipped bag. He does not know why he even bothered to take the bag when he left, but now he is glad he did. He sniffs the deodorant, shocked at how strong the fragrance is. A jockstrap, yellow stained with old sweat, is thrown into the wastebasket along with the expensive deodorant. He pockets the chapstick and stuffs his only other pair of jeans, toothbrush, paste, socks, 2 t-shirts, and a wool sweater into the bag and zips it. He looks around the room, looks up at the hazy crystal fixture hanging haphazardly over his head, almost half the prisms missing. He pockets 1 crystal from the tarnished chandelier and wonders how many other escapees have stolen them for souvenir reminders of a place not to return to. He pulls the night table from the corner away from the wall and pries open a crumbling square of sheetrock he had chiseled with his pocket knife just above the baseboard. He had been fearful of burglary when he first moved in, but 2 months later realized he need not be so concerned of theft at the old Breville Inn. The one good thing about the Breville is it is quiet, depressingly so, and he knows the money has been safe all along. The other tenants of the inn are dark-weathered fishermen. Jared sees them occasionally in the halls, loitering by the entrance like the pitted cement statues of pelicans erected outside of the front door by an owner from 20 years ago who tried, unsuccessfully of course, to resurrect the place from ruin. All the fishermen have a washed-out, vacant look in their eyes. Jared sometimes imagines he can see reflections of abandoned wives and children, mortgaged homes with neat little lawns, and four-door sedans in the driveways. These men at the Breville are going nowhere. He soon found they have no desire to steal. In fact, desire to escape is a thing long gone. They get up, they go out, they work at the docks, on the boats. With a beer or two or three they eat, although some are but rails of the men they once were. Most appetite is absent. They slip like shadows into their rooms with bottles, sometimes with a woman as tired as they are, all cut from the same cloth. The men only want some simple way to fill the hours during the day, some meaningless conversation at the docks in the morning and in the evenings, to go out in the boats away from land and catch what they are given, to stare into the deep, so like a woman. When need be, they find shoulders as sad to cry on, one who looks and feels as washed up as they, shoulders without commitments or criticism or blame. When they want to be alone again, the women go and the men sleep. Every sleep that much closer to the last day. Jared rocks onto the forefront of his boots and peers into the wall. An old gray sock is bunched into the left corner of the hole. A damp, musty odor, present all the time in the room, is much stronger there. A tomb-like chill drifts out from the wall. $375 in a sock. Unbelievable, Jared says as he pulls the roll of damp bills from the sock. Unbelievable it took 2 years to save so little. He does not count it. He squeezes the roll of bills but stuffs the sock back into the hole with a grin, props up the sheetrock and pushes the night table back against the wall, only to get it out of the way of the window. He pulls up the yellowing shade and looks out. It is still very early morning and clear, the sun just rising in the east for the resort city far beyond the Breville Inn, but not for the Cape. Normally he would be at the docks by now, just visible through the gaps between the old buildings in the distance. Fuck this, he says. He feels lighter and grateful. Is that right? He asks himself. Grateful? Yes, grateful. He remembers when he was a kid. He and 3 friends spent one spring digging a fort in the field behind their houses. They called it a foxhole, recreating war stories they did not understand, war stories they heard their fathers talk about. But they only ever heard snippets of the conversations, always told to find something else to do other than bother the old men. As they dug, somewhat easily because the ground was still moist, they made sound effects, explosions, gunfire, the sound of aircraft engines. They swore at each other and screamed. They had no idea. When the fort was finished about a week later, they all met there early one morning. The past 2 days had been warm. Dry winds, clear blue skies, and direct afternoon sunlight made for happy times as their work was coming to fruition. There was a tunnel about the length of 2 8-year-old boys. They had to shimmy through like worms with their arms pressed against their ribs and wiggle through like gophers on their bellies. Inside there was an area large enough to sit up in, with just about an extra head's distance from the top of the boy-made cave. It was large enough for 6 boys to sit cross-legged, knee to knee, so there was plenty of room for extras, dirty magazines, empty tins to be filled with food, candles, matches, stolen cigarettes or cigars. One hole in a corner brought light down into the lair, but the small fire pit and dirt chimney smoked terribly, and they were driven out of the fort the first and only time they tried. So it was Brett's idea to bring in scraps of lumber from his father's garage, prop 3 around the hole because the soil as it dried was coming down in bits. It was a great idea, they all agreed. After all, the ceiling was at least a foot thick, and they were careful not to step on the top when they were coming and going from home. A few days after the foxhole was finished, and all the various accoutrements had been collected and given a designated place, something happened 2 of the boys would never forget. That afternoon in May, it was uncommonly hot, not a cloud in the sky. The boys were sweaty from war games in the spring grass that had grown so tall and green, but then been browned by the sun before it could develop wheat. They were hungry. Matt brought peanut butter and jelly on white, 6 sandwiches in a brown paper sack, all that was left of the loaf. He had left the lid off the peanut butter jar. There were blobs of jam, bright red and seedless, on the counter by the kitchen sink, the jar empty, crumbs, an empty bread bag. What would normally be cause for some slight punishment would remain for 3 days before Matt's father could bring himself to clean it up, while his wife was crying upstairs. The other boys brought candy bars, a few apples, 3 cigarettes nabbed undetected from Neil's mother's case in the living room before he ran out the door with $2 in change for sodas on the way home. What exactly happened, Neil and Jared were never sure. They had eaten the sandwiches. There were candy bar wrappers littering the dirt floor. Brett, who was laying sideways on an old wool blanket, reaching up to scratch his back with his right hand because he was allergic to wool, was trying his best to casually smoke a filtered cigarette without coughing. It must have been the ash, Neil said a month or so afterward. He wasn't paying attention, remember? The blanket, it was smoking. Brett sat up and tried to put it out. Something sudden must have shook the roof loose. There was already so much smoke. I couldn't see, said Jared in response, but he was lying. He could not remember much of anything before it all fell in. He could not see in his mind's eye who was situated where in the foxhole. In fact, he could not even recall where he had been sitting when it all came down. But he did remember the laughing. So much laughing, he thought he would never stop. Then in the next second, his mouth was full of grit, and he was choking on it. Someone kicked him in the gut, hard, and someone else, someone so much bigger than any of his friends, had jumped through the roof, knocked him forward, and had landed on his shoulders. He does not remember much of anything else after that except sudden light and air, inseparable, tremendous, an explosion blasting him in the face and shaking him with mixed feelings of freedom, gladness, and grief. People from the neighborhood dug in with shovels. One woman in tears with a garden trowel. She had been planting an azalea when she heard the screams, which she knew from past experience are sexless in the midst of disaster. Her little girl drowned in the lake one summer when they went camping. Boy or girl in trouble, they sound the same. Children on their hands and knees digging with their hands. Then the fire department came, and in a short time the foxhole was uncovered. Among the apples, the tins, and the candy bar wrappers, they uncovered Matt and Brett. Matt's mother, kneeling on the edge, started screaming, "Cover that up, cover it up," as her son was found laying partially across a nude photo of a woman in the centerfold of one of the magazines taken from his father's toolbox in the garage. One of the firemen realized and shoved it into the dirt piled nearby with his boot. Funerals followed 2 days later. The second burial for the 4 boys, 2 lost, 2 attending. You don't know, do you, Neil says, almost a month later, one June evening on the porch, the mosquitoes buzzing in Jared's ears. We're lucky, Neil says, looking down at his shoes. The blackened laces of his left are fraying around a grommet of one sneaker. It is about to break. No telling where, no knowing when. Jared looks down and watches one mosquito sucking blood from his forearm. He reaches behind the insect so slowly, pinches it between his thumb and forefinger. Blood is the sign he is still alive, but he feels dead. His blood and the mosquito's legs and wings stick to his fingers like glue. Tell me, Jared says, without looking up, how are we lucky? My father says it's just the way it is. He says that's just the way life is sometimes. Like for some reason, we were meant to make it out. Like why were you and me sitting by the posts under the hole? Neil pauses, not sure if he should keep talking. Just sit there, put his hand on his friend's shoulder, or go home. Then Jared says, tell me. He is crying, but Neil cannot see the tears. So, Neil stays and he talks. Well, that bruised rib you got, that was me. I was sitting right next to you, and somehow the dirt didn't get me as much as it did you guys. I figured the top of my head was only covered by maybe a few inches because I jumped up a ways and I could see. I could feel you underneath my right foot when I jumped. I knew it wasn't the ground, it was you. So I started digging. I thought I'd never find you in all that fucking dirt, but I did. If we hadn't been sitting under the hole, we'd be... Neil stops talking. He looks at his friend who is looking at Neil's shoelace held together by a few threads. I'm so glad, God damn it, Neil, I'm glad. Jared is wiping blood and mosquito on the leg of his jeans. He turns his head to the side and rubs the tears roughly from his eyes into the shoulder of his t-shirt, furthest away from Neil, who pretends his friend has not been crying. I'm glad it wasn't us, but I feel so bad, Jared says. So, Jared is grateful for the $375 he has miraculously managed to save in these 2 years on the Cape. And though he still cannot remember being saved by Neil, he does remember the light when he was pulled from the Foxhole cave-in, and he remembers the air, but for the taste of dirt and the grit of the sand between his molars, the beautiful metallic taste of mineral as he bit down. Only today he does not feel guilty for feeling glad. There are no burials to be rescued from, and there are no burials to attend. In a way, he will look back on the inn and his room as a sort of unpleasant classroom memory, the way he might look at a small desk he once sat in day after day, but would no longer comfortably fit in, now grown, or a tree swing he fell out of and broke a limb. It is a place once full of uncertainty and discomfort, a place he never thought he would grow out of. The way an hour or a day feels endless to a child, and then one day they wake up and leave home. He feels different, but in a way he cannot put his finger on.